Hello everyone and welcome to this follow-up video which is a game review to the game that was part 41 of the Chess Rating Run series. So I played that game and ended up winning, although there were some mistakes by both sides. But this is the game review follow-up to that video. If you watched the first video, thank you. And here is the game review. So let's jump into this. I had the black pieces, and the game began with, let's look at the analysis here. It looks like I played 80.9% accuracy to their 76.3. A few decent moves in there. It says intense, nice win, you were never in trouble. I did miss a big winning move here, so we'll take a look at that. All right, let's see how the game began with the analysis here. So they started with c4, the English opening, and then I responded with knight to f6. So this c4 move, it covers the d5 square here, and this knight move develops a piece, but it also attacks d5. So maybe later I could push a pawn to d5, and this knight also covers e4. So they continue with knight to c3, a standard move to jump the knight in behind this developed pawn. And fight for control of the center, especially this d5 square here. All right, so now g6 is played, and this is a King's Indian type of setup, but it's a little different in the English opening here. So with this move, it just prepares the way for the bishop to jump to g7 and lets you castle pretty quickly here. So they do the same thing, which is common in the English opening. They prepare to fianchetto their bishop there, and our bishops will fire down the center of the board. All right, so we both develop our bishops, and then I castle, and white develops the other knight and also prepares to castle kingside. So now here I wasn't sure what the best move to play was. I'm trying to start a little different opening repertoire, and so I'm still learning the ins and outs and all the moves of these different openings. So let's see here. It recommends an immediate d5, although it says c6 is just as good, which would help prepare the move d5. So c6 is played, and then they respond with d4, helping to take control of the center here. And so black has to be careful not to just let white pile all these pawns into the center and take control and end up being too passive. So here I played e6 next, thinking I'll play e6 and it'll help bolster this d5 pawn push. But it looks like I should have just played d5 immediately. That would have been a better move. So the computer says that e6 is a mistake. And with that move, it gives a +1 advantage to white here. Why is that? Well, maybe it was just a waste of time preparing this d5 pawn push, and instead I should have done it right away, and that would have kept the game about even, just slightly in white's favor. So the better move was the immediate d5 pawn push here. All right, so they castle, and it says that's a good move, although it does prefer an immediate e4. Oh, and that may be the reason why this e6 move wasn't the best, because if they would have played e4 and then I try and push this, it would have just broken open the center pretty good. They could have captured with their c pawn, And then if I captured, they could capture with their e-pawn, and maybe we would just end up with isolated pawns here in the center, both of us. But white would have this knight and possibly the bishop attacking it. So I don't know. It could cause problems. Anyway, we'll move on here. So here I played d5, which it said is best. And they pushed forward with c5. So it says that's a good move, but best would have been just to develop another piece. Develop the bishop here to f4. Although that may give black the opportunity to attack that bishop at some point. But the computer says it's best. And who am I to argue with the computer, because it has a lot more calculating power than I have. So let's move on here. So I developed my other knight, and it says that was good, but I should have immediately attacked this pawn here. So that would have been a better move, to just immediately fight and attack this pawn on c5. All right, so now they move forward to protect that pawn and start trying to gain space. So, I probably should have just played b6 here, but I played a5. And it says that's good, but it prefers e5. So usually a good strategy is when your opponent is attacking on the wings, as he is here, pushing these pawns forward. A lot of times it's good to counterattack in the center. And that's also true if you want to attack on the wings. A lot of times it's good to make sure that the center is stable and it's not going to break open and cause problems. So if you have a solid center that's not going anywhere, then it's decent to attack on the wings. All right, so moving on, queen to a4 was played, and it says this is an inaccuracy, which then gives or puts the game in black's favor. And when white played this, I thought, man, am I in trouble here? Is he just going to be able to capture a pawn at some point? I can't capture his pawn, or he would capture my rook. But black was not in trouble at all here. And it said that b5 was a better move, which would just continue his attack, and the pawn would be protected by his knight. So next, b5 was played, and it says that's an excellent move, although it looks like it wanted me to just ignore all that and just attack here in the center. So, once again, when your opponent's attacking on the wing, it's often a good time or a good strategy to counterattack in the center. Okay, so the queen moves back here, and it says that is best, because I'm under attack. He has to get out of this attack, and I guess he didn't want to move here, because then I could just push forward and chase him away further. All right, so I played a4, and it says that that's a mistake. It would be better to just push my rook up here where it would be guarded by this bishop, and then I could capture the pawn and chase the queen away. So I overlooked that possibility, and it says that that would have kept the game in black's favor, but now after a4, it's +1 in white's favor. So, once again, I misplayed that. So now bishop to g5 is played, and that's an excellent move, but the computer preferred bishop to f4, which maybe would give an opportunity to put the bishop in here on the other side of white's pawn chain. From bishop, or the bishop at f4 would also back up a knight jump into here possibly. So the game continued with me playing h6, which was best to chase this bishop out of here. I saw an interesting video on YouTube where apparently Bobby Fischer had a rule that he played by, that whenever the opponent moved one of their pieces on his side of the board, he always tried to trade that piece off or chase it away or get rid of it. So, if that's a good strategy for Bobby Fischer, then it's probably good for the rest of us. So, h6 to chase his bishop away. He retreats up here, bishop to d2, and it says better would have been just to capture this knight. So that's interesting. Usually you don't want to give up your bishop pair, but the computer prefers that here and says that it would keep white ahead by +1. Now with this bishop retreat, the game is even. Okay, so I continued on with rook to e8, and it says that that is a miss. That better would have been knight to e4 to keep the game even. So I don't know. That's interesting. Okay, I see what the strategy behind that could be. With knight to e4, it attacks this bishop, and if black were to capture, or excuse me, if white were to capture the black knight, and then I recapture here, the knight would be forced to move, and where would it move? If it jumped forward, I could capture. And then if they captured my bishop, well, no, then he would capture here. So we could take a look at that. So best would have been, if I go back, it's saying best would have been this move. So to move here, says that is best. And then it doesn't recommend capturing. It just recommends queen to b2 here. Just defending the bishop, I guess, or just getting the queen maneuvered over to where it can move into a more active position. All right. So moving on here, let's see. Rook to e8 was played. Not the best move. Now it's +1 in white's favor. So now queen to c1 is played, creating a battery here with queen and bishop targeting this h6 pawn. So it says that's an inaccuracy, that it would be better just to move the rook over here to, let's see, rook at a to d1, which that's generally a good idea. When you're developing your pieces, we see that here white just moved a piece that was already developed, back to the back rank, and this rook is just sitting here not doing much. All right, so I continue by protecting here, and it says that's excellent, but the computer prefers e5, which is interesting. I mean, it would just give up this pawn, if, well, let's take a look at that and see why that would be the best move. E5, and it says here that after knight captures, pawn captures, rook captures, then black would come out ahead here. Well, let's take a look at it. So knight captures, pawn captures, and then here it's thinking, and interesting. The number one move is knight to h7, which oh, I guess would allow the bishop to fire up along this diagonal. So I don't know. That's another tricky computer variation, which, maybe the computer would have no problem playing that kind of stuff, but it's a little harder for us humans to see those kind of variations. All right, so let's go back here. Um, All right, so instead of e5, I played king to h7 just to guard this pawn. And then we have a3 being played. And the computer says that that is a mistake, which swings the game to 0.5 in black's favor. So very interesting. Bishop to f4 is recommended by the computer to keep the game in white's favor. So I would say this move just probably kind of wasted a move by just pushing forward here. It didn't really improve the position very much for white. All right, and it gives time for black to play e5, which the computer says is a great move. So let's see if that was the best move. I imagine it would be if it was considered a great move. Yeah, so e5 looks like the best move to even the game. e5 is played fighting back in the center. So the best response is to capture with the knight. And what did our opponent do? They captured with the pawn, which it says that's an excellent move. But better would have been to capture with the knight. So now I recapture, and the best response is to capture, and now I recapture with the rook, which is best. So the only problem is my rook is kind of in the center. It could be chased away with possibly f4 or the bishop move here. It looks like bishop, interesting, bishop to e3 that's interesting. The computer recommended move is bishop to e3, although it does say just playing e3 with the pawn here is good as well. All right, so continuing on, here rook to e1 is played, and that is an inaccuracy that swings the game even more in black's favor. So now it's negative 1.3 in black's favor. All right, so looks like rook to e7 is the top recommended move. Rook to h5 looks like that is not a bad move either. Although, I don't know, rook to h5, it could allow an attack, moving this bishop up here and attacking this bishop, trying to trade off the bishop. Whenever your opponent fianchettos their bishop, a lot of times if you can trade that off with your bishop, it'll leave weak squares around your opponent's king that you might be able to take advantage of. So anyway, in the game, so they want rook to e7. I played an inaccuracy, bishop to f5 here, which, I don't know, I guess I just wanted to develop a piece, help fight for control of this e4 square. But rook to e7 looks like was the best or the recommended move. And then I think they wanted to follow it up with bishop to f4 and bishop to f5. So anyway, the game continues with e3. So white pushes forward here, although this does block in this bishop. So I don't know, that could be the downside of this move, although the computer says this is best. All right, so I play knight to e4, which is good, but bishop to d3 would have been better. Ah, yes. All right. if I would have played bishop to d3, I could have repositioned the bishop here on the outside of this pawn chain, where it can keep an eye on a lot of squares in the center and on the queen side here, and then it wouldn't be blocking my pawn push. So yeah, that would have been a decent move there. All right, so I overlooked that, and now it says knight takes e4 would even the game up. But instead, my opponent retreats with knight to e2. It says that's a good move, but better would have been to capture and trade off pieces here. But, this does allow this knight to reposition to f4 or d4. And, d4 here, it could attack this pawn on c6. So, all right, I jumped forward here, capturing the bishop, trying to gain the bishop pair. And now the queen recaptures. Let's take a look at that. It says that was a good move, but it preferred h5. So that's interesting. h5. I guess the h5 move, I don't know, would gain space on the queen side. Maybe allow a repositioning of the bishop up here to eye the queen, but I don't know. This is probably better to leave the bishop on this long diagonal. All right, so after the queen captures, we have bishop to e4, where I'm trying to trade off his defensive bishop. He ignores that and moves forward, and so I move here to protect this attacked pawn on c6. And then, here also maybe my queen can jump up here to queen to h3, and swing the rook over and have some kind of threat here of capturing this h-pawn. But all of this is ignored. Finally, this queenside rook is developed here to the center. All right, so now it says that's a good move, but better would be to keep the bishop and retreat it back here. And because he didn't do that, now that allows me to capture and trade off his good defensive bishop, which that's the best move. Remember, if your opponent has fianchettoed their bishop and you can trade it off, it will leave potential weaknesses on these light squares around the king that maybe you can take advantage of. All right, so next, rook to e4 was played. So, maybe it would have been better to move over here to h5 and threaten an attack with the queen. But let's see. I don't know if that would do anything now, because if I went over here with rook to h5, they could reposition their rook over here to protect this, or they could maybe, well, if they pushed forward with their pawn, I could try and attack. All right. Moving on, they attack here. Now I have to retreat. So let's see if those moves were okay. So it says rook to e4 was good, but queen to d7 would have been better. Which, yeah, queen to d7 would allow me to get this other rook out. All right, so probably earlier I should have moved my queen here instead of bringing it all the way back. All right, f3 is good, but h4 would have been better. Now we have a retreat of the rook, and that gives white time to reposition his knight, which, I guess he didn't want me capturing. All right, so now queen to f5, although it did prefer queen to c7 here. Which, by putting the queen on c7, that probably would be better, because the queen would be safer back here, and it could possibly jump up here and create a battery with the bishop. Here, there could be possible, well, knight to d4 could just attack my queen now and drive it away. But the knight moved to f4, which apparently that is even better. So why is knight to f4 better? Well, I guess it places the knight forward, but keeps this square open possibly for the queen to jump in here at some point. Although, I don't know, now that can't happen because of this bishop. So, knight to f4 is best. Well, let's see where that knight should go. So we double up the rooks, which is best. And now this move is played. g4 is a mistake. All right, so a mistake has been made. Best would have been h4. So if we go back, it looks like h4 is the best move. And then they recommend that I play queen to f6 and create a battery here. Which I think I did do eventually. All right, so g4 is played, a mistake, and that it says that would allow queen to g5, which is funny. I thought about a queen to g5 move here in the game, but I didn't play it. I thought, would that do anything? Because I could threaten to go here, and I thought, well, the queen could just move here anyway. And maybe that doesn't work. All right, anyway, after this, we have queen to f6. So I retreat back, and it says that's a good move. And now rook to e2, a blunder is played. So this was the biggest blunder in the game, and I just missed my opportunity here. So this allows me to capture here. Queen takes f4, and I just completely overlooked that move and didn't see it. So here it says the best response is, well, we'll see what they should have done. Instead of that move, they wanted queen to f2. So, which is what I mentioned earlier, the queen jumping into f2 and covering these dark squares in case the queen tries to jump in here, possibly. Or jump here and try and break something open. But the blunder was played, rook to e2, and now it's saying that the best move is just to capture this knight, sacrifice the queen, and here the best move, it looks like, would be just to play e4 here, just push the pawn forward, but then that allows a capture of the queen, and black would just be ahead of knight. If you have the second best move, if we have a capture here, well, then that would allow a capture with the fork of the queen and the king here. So you're ahead in material with, two rooks and a bishop, which is 13 points here to their, well, let's see, they have 14, but after this fork here, the best move, it looks like, is to move the king up, and then you would just capture, and after a recapture, black ends up ahead in the end here. So, now I guess you could even jump your rook up here to e3 and target this pawn. So I completely overlooked that whole sequence. And, if I want to keep driving my rating upwards, I'm going to have to try and do better at catching those kind of tactics. All right, let's go back here and take a look at what happened in the game. So queen to c3 was played instead. A big miss. And my opponent, they respond with queen to d3. Although it looks like if they would have captured, the game would have been pretty even, still in black's favor. So instead, they played queen to d3 here, another blunder. And it looks like they should have just captured. All right, so here it says that the best move is, let's take a look at this. Now it wants queen to b3, but I didn't see that. I believe I just captured what happened in the game. So, queen to d3. I just captured, but it looks like it wanted rook to just capture here. So instead of just capturing, it wanted me to just jump up here, and then my queen would be protected. What do they recommend here? If if the rook captures, my other rook would capture, and it just turns out the same. But looks like the best move would be now to capture, and then I don't want to capture with the rook, or they would jump down here and capture this rook. So I would have to capture with the bishop to stay in the lead here. And then it looks like after king to f2, black would be ahead by a little over a pawn, about a pawn and a quarter material. Let's see. All right, anyway, before this game review goes on too long, let's go back and look at what happened in the game. After queen to d3, I captured, which I should not have done. I missed another little tactic here of capturing with the rook. And then the game continued with a rook recapture, which is best. Then my bishop jumps up here to e5, which it says is excellent, but bishop to f6 maybe was a little bit better. And we have a retreat. A great move here, because if he would have left his knight there, I could have captured it. If he would have recaptured with the pawn, then he would lose a rook there. So that was a great move because it's the only way to save that knight. All right, so now I just retreat back, and it says that king to g7 would have been better, and just leave that bishop there, which, yeah, I should have left that bishop there. And now we have f4, and that's an inaccuracy. King to f1 is what the computer wants, to reposition the king maybe to a better square. All right, so the game continues with f6, and it says that is good, but rook to e4 immediately would have been better. But I don't know if that was played. He could try and kick my rook out of there. Then what do? Do I try and march over to here? So, I don't know. That's something to think about. Oh, no. I could take this pawn. If he captures, then I get this rook with check. Well, unless his knight would have moved there. Okay, moving on. King to f3, the best move, getting the king up into the action. And then I push forward with f5, and it says g5 would have been better. Okay, so, yeah, g5, that would have been better, because he would either have to push forward here, or, if he captures, I could recapture, open up a line. But I think I pushed this pawn forward to keep his pawns on the dark squares so they could possibly become a target of my bishop. Alright, so g5 was played. I played h5, and let's go back a little bit and see. After g5 was played, it says that's an inaccuracy. That just to capture here would have kept the game about even. So trading off pawns, opening up maybe a spot for this rook, then we probably would have had to trade off some more. So I played h5, and that's an inaccuracy. It says I should have just moved my rook up here. All right. So now the knight jumps up here to keep my rook out of there. But it says rook at e to d2 would have been better. Huh. Interesting. All right. Well, now we have king to g7, and then the game continued with h4 kind of closing up the king side over here. And then my king, I start moving closer to the center, which is important in the end game. Your king is a valuable piece in the end game, so make sure that you use it. Now the knight retreats back, and from here it could swing back into the game. Possibly knight to c6. Well, let's see what happens. So I move up rook to e6. Why did I go here? I probably wasn't sure what to do. I didn't want to move all the way up, or he would just jump his knight in here and attack my rook. And I guess I'm protecting this pawn. But I realized later that at some point his knight can jump into here and attack the rook and the pawn. So knight to c3, the best. I start to reposition my bishop. I wanted to move it here, 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 and try and take control of the diagonal. Now we have rook to e1. I start repositioning my bishop, and the knight retreats back so it can reposition and fork my rook and my pawn. And I would not be able to protect. I wouldn't be able to protect this, both of these. So I realize I have to move here to protect the pawn. He attacks. Now my only move is to jump up here to save my rook. And the game continues with him doubling up here. And I thought here that maybe he would sacrifice here and then just capture, but maybe it was even better he sacrificed over here, although the computer says he should not have sacrificed his knight, which I continue to reposition my bishop on this long diagonal, and a mistake is made. So white was not sure how to break through, so he sacrifices his knight, thinking that he's going to have a passed pawn here that can break through in the endgame. But it says this is a mistake. Better would have been knight to c2. So instead would have been it would have been better just to retreat back, help defend this pawn. I guess get out of the line of attack of the bishop when it moves here on the long diagonal. All right. So the mistake was made, sacrificing the knight. And when your opponent sacrifices something, if you can't see an advantage that they're going to get. So here I knew they wanted to try and get a passed pawn, but I thought, well, I have to capture, so it's usually good to accept the sacrifice and force them to prove that it was a good sacrifice. So I capture, and it says that is best. And now it's saying that black is ahead by about 1 and a little bit extra. All right, so rook captures, the best move. So they get what? 2 pawns for the knight so far and a passed pawn. All right, so now I move up here to just block this passed pawn from being able to move. But that opens me up for a check here. And let's see what would have been best. Instead of blocking with the rook, rook at c to e8 would have been better. So it would have been better to just immediately double up my rooks. So let's take a look at that. So the computer wanted me to immediately double up. Let's see. Although here, now the computer's saying to just move my bishop up here to g7. All right. Which, yeah, that would get ready to, give my bishop more scope and come up here and attack these pawns. All right. So I move here, not the best move. The other option was rook at c to e8. So yeah, we'll take a look at that. So instead of going up here, if I would have doubled rooks, then what? Then it recommends moving up here to protect the pawn. So you protect this pawn with the king. And now what? It wants black to play all right, why is it not pulling something up? So rook at 1 to d3, and then after this, what is it recommending? Oh, okay, rook to c4, jumping the rook over here, where it can possibly jump in the back and maybe attack this pawn, put pressure on this pawn. But mostly rook to c4 gets behind the passed pawn. So that's very important. When you're trying to stop a passed pawn, it's very important to jump in behind the passed pawn, because now it cannot move up here or I'll just capture it. So this is a very important move, especially with this passed pawn, 3 squares away. All right, so let's get out of that and see what happened in the final moves of the game. So I move up here to block this pawn, and it would have been better to get behind the passed pawn, double up, get behind the passed pawn. So rook to d7 check is played. I block. Then they move here, rook to d8, and it says that's a mistake, that it would have been better just to capture. So if that would have happened, so if I go back, if they would have just captured, well then it says that the king should capture here. That keeps the rook from coming down and causing problems. And now it's saying e4 would be the best move. And then after I capture, well, now the king is getting into the position. So king captures. It wants rook to e6. And then king to d5. So I don't know. This is crazy stuff here. So now the king is trying to infiltrate into the position, help this passed pawn move forward. So that could cause some issues. Now it wants rook to e3. So here you could jump in behind the passed pawn. You're also targeting this right here. Now, what does it want? The king jumping over here, capture, And the game is only slightly in black's favor if it went this way. So then we have this capture. Now what? Rook to f3. Oh, this is really tricky stuff here. Because now what? The king could just capture this other pawn and have two pass. Well, we already have two passed pawns. But it looks like king to b6 is recommended, which will help try and escort this pawn down. And now rook takes, b5, rook to c4, c6. So this is looking really tricky, and now the game is even. And so then after a3, anyway, the computer evaluates it as even here. Well, let's take a look here. Up here it says it's in black's favor. So if, let's see, no, a3. So if we go here, now what? Rook to d2 check. King to e6. And why wouldn't you just push forward here? So rook to d2, rook to d2, rook to d2 is recommended, but now it says it is in white's favor, or excuse me, black's favor. So anyway, bishop to g7, which is a great move, rook to e2, and now it looks like it is in black's favor. So this would have been a tough alternate outcome. But before this video goes extremely long, let me end it there with that variation. So we'll go back and look at the final moves. So here the rook moved to avoid a trade, I guess. The bishop gets up here on this long diagonal. And now we have this move being played here, which is a mistake. King to e2 would have been better. And now the bishop jumps up in here to attack the pawns. So we have the rook protecting the pawn. And now this is a mistake. Rook at c to e6 would have been better, to just double up here. That would have been a better move. Double up the rook. So in the end game, when you can double up your rooks and have them working together, that is almost always a good idea. All right, so the game continues with a capture here, and that is a miss. Better would have been rook at d. Let's see, rook at d to d8. So that would have been a better move. Double up your rooks, start attacking the king possibly. And then how would the king could have just moved up here, I guess. So instead we had, sorry, it went all the way to the beginning. So where were we at? Somewhere around here. All right, so block. Bishop repositions up to here, which was a mistake. This was a miss. It wanted white to double the rooks, but black finally doubles up first. And then we have the rook getting behind the passed pawn, but now we have capture with check, forcing a trade. The king must move. Now we capture here. The pawn starts pushing forward. We stop it with the bishop, but then there's a check. And so here, I don't know, I made a little mistake. Well, first I moved because I was in check. But then after this push here, I captured with the bishop when I, should have realized I could have just moved my rook in behind here to put pressure on that pawn. But I don't know. I made a stupid mistake there, and the game would have been winning right there if I would have moved the rook behind the pawn. So after capture, now I go after this. We have check. I move to protect the pawn. They attack. They check me again. And I thought, well, I'll just let this pawn go. And the rook does take, which is the best move. I take. And now I figure, well, I can check the king, although f4 would have been a better move, it says here. All right, so the king moves here, and that was a mistake. Now it's trapped on the edge of the board. So I start pushing the pawn, and now that pawn will become very dangerous. And here I thought, well, if let's see, if they capture, then my king would just capture, and then I could move up here and escort this pawn up. So I don't know, I guess we could take a look at that real quick. If he would have captured and I would have captured, what if he played this? Then I could have played that. White would have to go here. All right, and now what would I do? So this is a little trickier than I thought it was. Now they can threaten this. But it looks like I could go there. They would promote, but I would promote with check. So, they promote to a queen. I promote to a queen with check. And then they would have to move away. So once they move, now we have check and I still have this passed pawn over here, which is going to cause a problem. Okay, we'll go back. And finally, the last move. So we have check. I start moving. They attack. And I see that I can push forward here. And their best move now is, let's see, rook to e4 or the king just capturing, but there's no way to stop the promotion of the pawn. And I thought, well, what happens if we have this? Now what? I'm under check, but it looks like after king to e7, we have the best move being rook to d1. But now I can just push forward anyway, promote, and I'm ahead now. They could take, and then I take. All right, so let's see here. In the game, they ended up capturing. I captured. They move. My queen jumped. Well, the game ended there. The game ended with king to g3 and white resigned. And it may have played on with queen to c4, although it says queen to g1 is better. But this is what the computer says could have happened. Now we have this, and then check again, and we'll end up capturing this pawn, and the queen would have just wreaked havoc, and this other passed pawn here. There's no way for white to do anything. All right, sorry, that was a long game review. If you stuck around for the whole thing, I thank you. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and feel free to leave comments or suggestions Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.